I hired a woman to clean the house while my whole family was out. About an hour later she called me and she whispered, "Ma'am, is there anyone else in the house?" I froze solid. "No, why do you ask? There's a woman upstairs." I started trembling like a leaf. "Get out of there right now." I called the police and drove home going way over the speed limit. I'm so glad you're here now. If you're watching this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're listening to my story of vengeance from. I want to know just how far it has traveled. That particular day, I woke up with a solid plan to clean the house myself. I wanted everything to be absolutely spotless, especially before the coastal rains made their inevitable return. When the humidity rolls in and makes everything feel heavier and dirtier, you know? So I rolled up my sleeves, grabbed a rag, and stood in front of the living room window, fully ready to dive in with enthusiasm. As I was wiping down the glass, the phone in my pocket started vibrating. I glanced at the screen. It was Yvette, my childhood friend, who I hadn't seen in what felt like forever. Her cheerful voice filled the phone as soon as I answered, letting me know she would only be passing through Savannah, Georgia, for one single day, and wanted to know if I was free for coffee. My heart instantly warmed hearing her familiar voice. Yvette and I shared so many memories back in the day, running through fields, staying up way too late, talking about all our hopes and dreams. How could I possibly say no to that? But then, thinking about all the cleaning I needed to get done, I hesitated for just a moment. I really couldn't leave the house in the state it was in. Then I had a thought. I remembered Brianna Parrish, the 20-something woman who lived in the alley near my place. She was slight, kind-natured, and I knew she was always looking for some extra work to help pay for her college classes. I gave her a call, and she immediately accepted, super grateful for the opportunity. I gave her some precise instructions to follow. I told her to clean the study, scrub the stairs that led up to the second floor, and above all else to be extra careful with the old, dusty shelves that belonged to my husband, Jerome. I left her a spare key under the mat and asked her to make sure she locked up tight when she was all finished. I drove over to the Magnolia Tree Cafe, where Yvette was already waiting for me. We sat down at a table under a sprawling live oak tree, the Spanish moss swaying gently in the breeze. She filled me in on her life in the city, about her children who were all grown up and starting families of their own. I told her all about Jerome, his work as a published novelist, and about my tranquil, although sometimes a little lonely, days. We laughed, reminiscing about old times and shared secrets. Right in the middle of our chat, my phone rang again. I checked the number. It was Brianna. I smiled, thinking she was probably just calling to let me know she was finished. But when I answered, I didn't hear her usual shy voice. Instead, I heard agitated breathing, like she was trying her hardest to contain a full-blown panic. "Miss Simone," she whispered in a shaky voice that I could barely even hear. "Is there anyone else in the house?" My heart just stopped. "No," I replied, trying to sound as calm as I possibly could. "I'm out having coffee. My husband is at his publisher's office and won't be back until tonight." "What's going on, Brianna?" There were a few seconds of complete silence on the other end of the line. All I could hear was her ragged breathing, and it was making me more anxious. Suddenly, her voice broke the silence. "There's a woman on the second floor. I was cleaning the stairs and I saw her. She was wearing a long white dress, and her hair was all messy. She walked down the hallway and disappeared into the last room." Her words were like an ice-cold knife stabbing me right in the chest. I tried my best to stay calm, but the hand that was holding the phone was shaking uncontrollably. My first thought was that someone had broken into the house. The house was over 70 years old, but we were always super careful about locking everything up tight. How could someone have gotten in without us knowing? I quickly apologized to Yvette, telling her I had a bit of an emergency and had to run. She looked at me worried, but I just shook my head, unable to explain any further at that moment. I told Brianna on the phone, "Brianna, get out of the house right now. Lock the door behind you and wait outside. I'm on my way back." I called the police while I was driving, my voice cracking with anxiety. I explained that there was an intruder in my house, trying to provide all the important details even though my mind was racing a mile a minute. I tried calling Brianna again, but she didn't answer. Every unanswered ring made my heart pound harder, like it was trying to escape my chest. I was imagining the absolute worst, that something terrible had already happened to her, or that the intruder had attacked her. That day, the streets of Savannah seemed to stretch on forever, even though I was flooring the accelerator. When I finally arrived back home, a police cruiser was already parked right in front of the door. Brianna was sitting all hunched over on the front step. Her face was as pale as a ghost, and her eyes were wide open, filled with sheer terror. I rushed towards her, gave her a hug, and asked anxiously, "Are you okay? Did you see anything else?" Brianna just shook her head. Her lips pressed tightly together as if she couldn't utter a single word even if she tried. Two police officers, one middle-aged with a serious look and a younger one, walked out of the house. They said they had checked every single corner, every room, every closet, under all the beds, even the backyard shed. There was absolutely no one there. There were also no signs of forced entry. All the doors and windows were locked tight, without a single scratch or strange mark to be found. I sighed with relief, but the feeling of uneasiness just wouldn't leave me. Brianna recounted what she saw, still trembling like a leaf. "I swear I saw her, Miss Simone. She didn't even look real. She was like a shadow. I won't dare go up to the second floor again." I stroked her shoulder to console her, but a seed of doubt began to grow inside me. This house was over 70 years old. It had belonged to Jerome's family long before we even moved in. The brick walls, the creaking wooden doors, the dark corners, they had always made me feel like they were hiding something deep down. But I still couldn't imagine a woman. Just then, I heard Jerome's sedan pull up the cobblestone driveway in front of the house. He got out, his face surprised to see the police car and me standing next to Brianna. I took his arm and quickly told him everything that had happened. I fully expected him to be just as worried as I was, to want to figure out what in the world was going on. But Jerome only smiled faintly, a smile I rarely ever saw. He approached Brianna, patted her gently on the shoulder, and said in a soft, almost mocking voice, "You must have just been tired, honey, and confused the sun's reflection with a shadow. Our house is old. It has many corners that play tricks on the eyes." Brianna lowered her head without saying another word. I looked at her, my heart heavy. I knew she wasn't a fanciful girl. She was hardworking and she was honest. She had absolutely no reason to invent something like this. But Jerome's gaze, his calm demeanor, began to make me doubt my own instincts. Maybe he was right after all. I apologized to the police for making them come out on what ended up being a wild goose chase. A bitter embarrassment rose in my chest. I paid Brianna for her time, asked her to go get some rest, and promised I would call her if I needed her again. 3 months later, I officially retired. There were no more rushed mornings getting ready for work, no more endless meetings, and no more days spent racing against impossible deadlines. The old house in Savannah became my whole world, but the sudden change of pace actually kept me awake at night. Every single night, I stayed up staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock ticking away in the darkness. During those sleepless nights, I began to notice strange sounds coming from the attic. At first, they were just slight noises, as if something small had accidentally fallen to the floor. I easily convinced myself that it was just the wind blowing through the old windows, or the wood creaking due to the changing weather. But little by little, the sounds became clearer, more vivid. I heard something that sounded exactly like a chair scraping slowly across the floor, heavy and deliberate. Then came light but constant footsteps, as if someone was pacing back and forth. Sometimes I even heard the distinct rustle of paper, like someone was silently turning the pages of a book. I told Jerome about it one morning as we were having breakfast in the kitchen. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I couldn't help feeling genuinely uneasy. "Honey, I've been hearing noises in the attic lately. It's definitely not the wind. It really sounds like someone is up there." Jerome yawned without even looking up from the newspaper he was reading. He replied in a distracted tone, "It's just rats, Simone. Our attic is old. It's full of stuff. It's practically a mouse paradise. I'll buy some traps tomorrow, set them up, and that'll be that. The very next day, just as he promised, Jerome brought home some large metal traps, the kind that make a really loud snap when they close shut. He placed them at the foot of the ladder leading up to the attic, right beneath the old wooden door. "There," he said, dusting off his hands. "Now you can sleep soundly, my love." Oddly enough, the noises disappeared completely after that. No more footsteps, no more scraping chairs, no more rustling paper. I sighed with relief, convincing myself that Jerome had been right all along. Maybe it was just mice, and I had been worrying way too much over nothing. But then some really strange things started happening. Things that were just impossible to ignore or explain away. One afternoon I bought a package of spicy sausage from the local market, my absolute favorite for its intense, robust flavor. Jerome, on the other hand, had never liked anything spicy. He wouldn't even taste it if it had the slightest bit of spice. I carefully wrapped the sausage in paper and stored it in the refrigerator, fully planning to savor it over the weekend. The very next morning, when I opened the refrigerator door, I just froze. A large chunk was missing from the sausage. The cut was irregular, as if someone had hastily sliced it off in a hurry. I asked Jerome, who was reading the newspaper in the living room, "Did you happen to take some of the sausage from the refrigerator?" He looked up, frowning slightly, as if my question was completely absurd. "Oh, I actually felt like trying something spicy yesterday, so I cut off a little piece," he replied distractedly. "It was good, actually." I stood motionless, unsure of what to say. Jerome had never tolerated spicy food. He even complained when I cooked something with too much seasoning, but I didn't want to start an argument, so I just nodded and quietly walked away. A seed of doubt lodged itself firmly in my chest. A few days later, the sausage had completely disappeared. I rummaged through the refrigerator, checked the trash can, but found absolutely no trace of it whatsoever. This time I didn't ask Jerome anything. An uncomfortable feeling, like a solid block of ice, began to settle deep within me. Then one Saturday afternoon, Jerome and I drove to Charleston, South Carolina, to visit some old friends. We left early in the morning and didn't return until late at night. When we walked through the front door, the house was as silent as always. I went straight upstairs to the second-floor bathroom to wash my face and shake off the fatigue from the long day. But as I stepped inside the bathroom, I felt something cold and damp. The floor was soaked. Water seeped between my sandals, icy cold. The floor was completely wet, as if someone had just stepped out of the shower. I looked around and saw drops of water still sliding down the shower walls, shining faintly under the dim light. My heart hammered loudly in my chest. No one had been home all day. How was this even possible? I called out for Jerome, my voice trembling slightly. "Come here, please. The bathroom is soaked, like someone just took a bath." He entered the bathroom, looked around for a moment, and then simply shrugged. "It must have been the afternoon rain that came in through the ceiling vent, my love." I looked out the window. The street in front of the house was completely dry under the glow of the street lights. "It hasn't rained, Jerome," I said, trying to sound calm and rational. He frowned, slightly annoyed. "Then it must be a leak in the old pipes. You always worry about nothing. I'll call a plumber tomorrow." But he never did call a plumber. In the following days, the bathroom floor was dry, as if nothing had ever happened. I even checked the ventilation grate and all the pipes, but everything seemed completely normal. Jerome's explanation, although somewhat reasonable, failed to erase the feeling of unease that was steadily growing inside me. The strange noises in the attic, the mysteriously disappeared sausage, the inexplicable puddle of water with no apparent source, it all seemed like unconnected fragments. But when put all together, they formed a disturbing image that I just couldn't stop thinking about. A week or so later, I decided to clean Jerome's study. It was his pride and joy. A small room on the second floor with floor-to-ceiling oak bookshelves filled with literally hundreds of books and old documents. I always thought that someday we really should donate some of the books that we rarely ever read to the city library so that they could actually reach the hands of those who really needed them. That day, I stood in the middle of the room, starting to classify all the books on Jerome's desk. There were haphazard piles of drafts, notes, and papers stacked chaotically as if he never intended to organize them in any way, shape, or form. When I lifted a particularly heavy stack, my hand shook slightly, and all the papers spilled onto the floor. The sound of the paper falling broke the otherwise perfect silence in the room and made me jump a little. I bent down to pick them up, and right at that very moment, a small wooden drawer that had been stuck for years suddenly sprang open with a dry click. I hesitated for an instant and then looked inside the drawer. There, beneath a pile of yellowed drafts, was a small hardback notebook with a dark brown leather cover and worn corners. It looked really old. It honestly didn't even seem like something that would belong to Jerome. He always liked modern, neat things: laptops, fancy pens, and immaculate white sheets of paper. That notebook, with its worn leather cover and a loose cord, seemed to be from a completely different era. With a mix of both curiosity and dread, I took it in my trembling hands and opened it to the first page. Inside, there were pages and pages full of handwritten letters. The calligraphy was soft, elegant, and clearly feminine. I flipped through the pages, skimming them quickly. They were story outlines, character descriptions, plot ideas. There was a fragment that spoke of a small town on the side of a mountain where a woman lived completely alone, patiently waiting for someone who would never return. Another one mentioned a buried secret with gruesome details that made my skin crawl. These ideas, although distinct in their own right, had a similar feel to the plots of Jerome's most famous novels, the ones that had given him his widespread renown. My heart was pounding, my throat dry. It just couldn't be a mere coincidence. I know Jerome way too well. He absolutely hates writing by hand. He always said it was slow and messy, a complete waste of valuable time. Everything of his, from rough novel drafts to quick work notes to even simple shopping lists, he did on the computer. I remember one time when I asked him to just jot down a restaurant address, and instead of just grabbing the pen that was right next to him, he turned on his computer just to write it down. So, whose notebook was this? A secret collaborator's? An admirer's gift? I sat down heavily in the chair, with the notebook weighing heavily in my hands. Part of me wanted to show it to Jerome as soon as he got back home. I desperately wanted to hear his explanation, but I hesitated. As I mentioned before, I know him way too well. Jerome always knows exactly how to make everything sound perfectly logical and reasonable. He would just smile, a disarming smile. He would probably just say it was a gift from a reader or just an old idea from back when he had tried to write by hand. And I, as I've done so many times before, would just nod and let everything just sink into the silence. But not this time. I really didn't want to just let it go this time. Carefully, I put the notebook back in the drawer and pushed it all the way to the back, as if I was afraid that it would just disappear completely if I didn't keep it hidden away. That night I was sleepless yet again. Lying in bed, I watched the ceiling and listened to the incessant ticking of the clock in the dark. Around 2 in the morning, a slight creaking sound came from the hallway. It was a small noise, but in the complete silence of the night, it was clearly audible, like an unsettling whisper. I sat up abruptly, my heart racing completely out of control. I don't know exactly why, but I immediately thought of the small door that led up to the attic, the one that Jerome and I almost never opened. I got up carefully without turning on the light, afraid that the brightness would somehow shatter the truth that I was about to discover. The faint moonlight entered through the window, just enough for me to see a thin crack of light. The attic door was ajar. A cold, damp draft descended from above, bringing with it the distinct smell of old paper and stale air. I stood motionless, my feet seemingly glued to the floor. Fear mixed with curiosity completely paralyzed me. I went back to the room and gently shook my husband's shoulder. "Jerome, wake up. The attic door is open." Jerome groaned, half asleep, and got up with an irritated gesture. He put on his slippers and walked in front of me down the hallway without saying a single word. But when we arrived at the attic door, it was completely closed, the latch firmly in place as if no one had even touched it. I stood there staring, intently looking for any sign that it had been opened. A scratch, a crack, anything at all, but there was nothing. Jerome turned to me with an expression of pure tiredness and disappointment. "Simone," he said in a grave, exhausted tone, "you've been way too tense lately. You aren't sleeping well, and that's why you're seeing things that simply don't exist. Just come back to bed now. He walked me back to the bedroom. I lay down, but I kept my eyes wide open, fixed on the ceiling. For the first time I began to doubt myself, wondering if I had truly imagined everything. In the days that followed, ever since I had found that mysterious notebook, I tried my best to keep everything as normal as possible. Although the unease was consuming me internally, I started to notice Jerome's every single gesture, every look, every word. Lately, he had picked up a new habit that only served to increase my deep suspicions. Around 10 o'clock at night, when I was already in bed with a book in my hands, completely ready to fall asleep, he would say that he had to continue working in the study. I just need to concentrate a little, Simone. He would usually say in a soft but very firm voice. The manuscript is at a pretty complicated part. You just go to sleep first. I would nod, forcing a smile. But every time the study door closed, I felt an invisible distance opening further and further between us. One night I woke up feeling really thirsty. The clock on the bedside table showed almost 1 in the morning, and the second hand seemed to be counting something silently in the darkness. I reached out to touch Jerome, but the bed was completely empty, and the sheets were cold, as if he had never even been there to begin with. My heart leaped into my throat. A sensation of complete disquiet ran through my entire body. Where was he? I put on a thin robe and went out into the hallway, thinking that he might have fallen asleep at his desk, as he sometimes did when the pressure from the publisher exhausted him completely. I walked down the dark hallway. I went downstairs to the kitchen, thinking that he might have just gone down to get some water, but it was also empty. Only the faint moonlight was entering through the window, making the shadows of the plates on the shelves look like ghosts. I started walking through the house, calling his name, my voice growing shakier and shakier. My heart was pounding hard, as if it was sensing that I was about to confront something truly terrible. As I passed the staircase that led up to the second floor, I heard a very soft step, almost imperceptible if I hadn't been paying such close attention. I looked up, and under the dim hallway light, I saw a silhouette slowly descending. It was Jerome. He was barefoot, walking carefully, as if he didn't want to make even the slightest bit of noise. In his hand he was carrying a porcelain plate, the kind that we usually use for weekend dinners. When he saw me standing there, his eyes widened in surprise. An expression of shock crossed his face. The plate slipped from his hands, fell onto the stone floor with a sharp clank, and shattered into countless pieces. That sound tore through the silence of the night, startled me, and I took a step back in shock. I looked at the fragments, completely confused. The plate was empty, clean, with no traces of food or grease, as if it had been carefully washed. That only served to increase my complete bewilderment. I looked back up at Jerome and asked in a trembling voice, "What were you doing up there at this hour? I thought you were in the study." He bent down and began picking up the broken pieces with slow, deliberate movements, as if he was trying to buy some time to think of a reasonable answer. He avoided my gaze and said in a forced tone, I got stuck on the end of the book. The editor just won't stop pressuring me, you know? I just needed a quiet place to work, so I went upstairs for a little while. I got hungry and just went up there with some food." I stood there watching him pick up the pieces, unable to fully believe a single word that he was saying. I knelt down to help him clean up the mess. When our fingers brushed on the cold floor, I felt a distinct shiver of distance run between us. That hand that once gave me so much comfort now just chilled my skin to the bone. I knew that he was under a lot of pressure from the publisher. The constant calls from Mr. Sterling, his editor, kept him in a state of near constant tension. Maybe, I told myself, he just really needed some space to write. Maybe I was just overreacting to everything. The next morning the house felt heavy, as if an invisible cloud was floating above us. I woke up tired, my head still full of countless unanswered doubts. Jerome, avoiding looking at me, got up earlier than usual. I heard him silently preparing coffee, the soft clinking of the porcelain, but without the usual good morning greeting. He locked himself in the study, closing the door firmly, and I just knew that he didn't want any interruptions whatsoever. I stayed in the hallway, just staring at that wooden door with a heavy heart. Near noon, Jerome emerged from the study, dressed in a gray suit and carrying a small suitcase. He paused in the living room where I was sitting with a cup of cold tea. "I need to go away for a few days," he said in a flat, emotionless voice. "Maybe I'll go down to Atlanta. I just need a complete change of scenery to get some inspiration." I looked up completely surprised. Jerome never left without giving me some kind of warning. He always planned everything meticulously in advance, consulting the itinerary with me every step of the way. "Why so suddenly?" I asked, trying my best to sound calm, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. He didn't look at me directly. His eyes were fixed on the window, where the sunlight was filtering in through the dusty panes of glass. "The idea just came to me suddenly," he replied monotonously. "Be careful while I'm gone." But just before walking out the door, he suddenly turned back and placed his hands on my shoulders. His grip was stronger than usual, making me jump slightly. "Simone," he said in a low, serious tone, "while I'm away, don't let anyone in, do you hear me? Especially no one from the publishing house. If Mr. Sterling, my editor, comes looking for me, just tell him that I went on a trip and that you have absolutely no idea when I'll be back." I nodded slowly, but a growing feeling of unease was settling deep inside me. His words didn't sound like a simple warning at all, but more like a direct order, a serious alert. Jerome had only been gone for about 2 hours when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Mr. Sterling, Jerome's editor, standing next to a young assistant. They both looked incredibly impatient. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the doorknob, feeling my chest flutter nervously. Jerome's urgent words echoed in my head, but I just couldn't stay here any longer without answering the door. I took a deep breath and made the decision to open the door, no matter the consequences. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door and plastered on a forced smile. Mr. Sterling didn't even wait for an invitation. He barged right into the living room, a look of pure annoyance etched across his face. "Miss Whitlock," he barked, his voice sharp and unpleasant. "I know Jerome is home. Stop covering for him. We need that manuscript and we needed it yesterday. The deadline was 2 weeks ago." Trying to keep my voice steady, I repeated exactly what Jerome had told me to say. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling, but Jerome left this morning seeking inspiration. I have no idea when he'll be back." Mr. Sterling let out a sarcastic laugh that sent a shiver down my spine. He pointed towards the Hamiltons' house, our neighbors across the street. "Don't lie to me anymore," he snapped. "Mr. Hamilton says he sees the attic light on until very late every night. If Jerome's working that hard, he should have the manuscript ready, not be hiding like this." A younger woman, an assistant with kind eyes, spoke up. "Ma'am, we just want to help. If Mr. Jerome is experiencing writer's block, he should talk to us. We can offer support." Her voice was soft and understanding, but at that point, I couldn't really focus on what she was saying. Mr. Sterling's words had hit me hard. The attic light. I had never noticed it before. We hardly ever went up there. It was just a storage space filled with old boxes and spiderwebs. Why would there be a light on? And why would Mr. Hamilton say he saw it every night? My heart skipped a beat. I managed to maintain my composure as I walked them to the door, promising to let Jerome know as soon as I heard from him. But as I shut the door, I leaned against it, trembling. My mind was racing. All those little scattered pieces of information suddenly started to come together. The strange noises I'd heard in the attic, the piece of sausage that had gone missing from the fridge, the puddle of water in the bathroom, the mysterious notebook I'd found, the empty plate, and now this light. It all pointed to the same place, the attic. That dusty, forgotten space I hadn't been in for years. The fear I'd initially felt began to fade. Instead, a cold sense of determination started to grow inside me, like a quiet flame urging me to find out the truth. I headed out to the backyard shed, where a faint light from the street lamp peeked through a crack in the door. The musty smell of dust and old oil made me cough. I searched for the old folding ladder that we hadn't used since we moved in. It was heavy, covered in dust and cobwebs, as if time itself had forgotten it. I dragged the ladder down the second-floor hallway, each step seeming heavier than the last, as if I was carrying the weight of all my accumulated suspicions. When I finally positioned it under the hatch leading to the attic, I felt my heart pounding, but not from fear. It was a sense of urgency, a certainty that I was about to uncover something that would change everything. The metal latch was rusty, so stiff that I had to use all my strength, grip my teeth and push hard until it finally gave way. The metal made a sharp click like a final warning. I lifted the hatch door, and a suffocating wave of damp, stale air rushed down, carrying with it the smell of old paper and years of confinement. That smell turned my stomach, but I didn't stop. I turned on the flashlight on my phone. The cold, white beam sliced through the darkness. I took a deep breath and started to climb. Each rung creaked beneath my feet, as if guiding me towards a world I wasn't prepared to face. The attic was larger than I had imagined. A vast, dark space filled with stacked cardboard boxes, old furniture covered with dusty white sheets, and cobwebs hanging like ghostly curtains. The only light came from a small, grimy window, casting faint beams onto the wooden floor. I swept the flashlight across the entire space. My heart was beating so fast I thought it would burst out of my chest. In the furthest corner of the attic, there was a small, surprisingly organized space, like an oasis in the middle of the chaos. A wooden table, a chair with a broken leg, and an oil lamp burning dimly, casting a yellowish, almost dying light. And then I saw her. A woman sitting with her back to me. She was incredibly thin, with long white tangled hair cascading over her shoulders like a forgotten waterfall. She wore a yellowed white dress with torn edges. The sound of a pencil scratching across paper was the only thing breaking the silence, like a faint heartbeat of life. I stood there, paralyzed, my throat tight, unable to utter a word. I stammered, "Who? Who's there?" My voice sounded weak, swallowed by the darkness. The pencil stopped. The woman slowly turned her head. Under the dim lamplight, her gaunt, pale face came into view. Her eyes were sunken, tired, but with something familiar that made me tremble. My world crumbled. My legs buckled, and I had to lean against an old trunk to keep from falling. It was Alana, my sister. The face I hadn't seen in 30 years, only in dreams and faded photographs. Alana, who the entire family believed was lost forever, was right there in the attic of my own house, in a state that broke my heart. Around her was a small world of secret existence. A huge stack of handwritten manuscripts, several empty cans, rolling water bottles, a dirty blanket on a thin mattress, and an old bucket for her personal needs. Everything was living proof of a life lived in captivity. Alana looked at me, her dry lips trembling. She tried to speak, her voice raspy, as if she had forgotten how. "Sister. Simone." She couldn't say any more. She just looked at me with tear-filled eyes, as if begging for a forgiveness I didn't yet understand. I couldn't hear anything else. Hot tears welled up and streamed down my cheeks. I walked towards her like a sleepwalker, my legs shaking, my head spinning. Alana, my sister, the one I had cried for until my heart was empty, thinking I had lost her forever. Now she was here, alive like a ghost haunting my own home. I gently took her thin arm. I could feel every fragile bone beneath her skin. "Come downstairs to the living room," I said, my voice broken with sobs. "Come down now, Alana." I helped her stand up. A storm of emotions raged inside me. The overwhelming joy of finding her, the agonizing pain of seeing her like this, and the fear of the questions swirling in my head. Why was she here? Who had done this to her? And what did Jerome have to do with it? I guided her carefully down the stairs. Every step was unsteady, as if her legs had forgotten what it was like to leave that dark attic. The light from the house illuminated her face, highlighting her sunken features and narrowed eyes, unaccustomed to the brightness. She looked like a creature of the dark, seeing the sun for the first time, and that broke my heart into a million pieces. Alana, my sister, who had once shone as bright as the Savannah sun, was now nothing more than a fragile shadow. I led her to the living room. I gently sat her down in the most comfortable armchair, where the soft light from a lamp fell upon her like a caress. I rushed to the kitchen, filled a glass with cold water, and with trembling hands brought it back to her. Alana tried to hold the glass, but her hands were shaking so badly that the water spilled. I knelt down, held the glass steady, and helped her drink sip by sip. Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. I didn't want her to see me weak. She needed me to be strong, at least for now. After a few sips, Alana started to cry. It wasn't a soft, gentle cry. It was a silent scream, as if all the years of repressed pain were finally erupting all at once. She collapsed onto my shoulder. Her frail body shook, and I could only hold her tight, feeling every vertebra through her thin clothes. I didn't ask her anything. I just stayed there in silence, letting her cry, letting her tears wash away some of the weight she had carried for so long. When Alana finally calmed down, she began to speak, her voice broken, barely a whisper. "Sister Simone," she murmured, looking down at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. "I never thought I would see you again, especially not like this." I took her hand, squeezing it gently, trying to offer some warmth. "Tell me, Alana," I said, my voice firm but tender. "What happened? Why are you here?" And then she began to tell me everything, each word like a stab to the heart. She spoke of that fateful night 30 years ago, when her life had completely fallen apart. Darren Albright, her editor at the publishing house, had called her to his apartment to discuss work. Alana, young and naive, had trusted him. But when she got there, Darren was drunk. The look in his eyes was no longer that of a boss, but of a predator. He tried to force himself on her, his voice heavy with menace. Alana defended herself with every ounce of strength she had. She pushed him away, but he wouldn't stop. In the midst of the struggle, she panicked, grabbed a small marble statue, and hit him over the head. "Sister, I just wanted him to stop," she said, her voice choked with emotion. I didn't want that to happen, but the blow was too strong." Darren fell to the floor, hitting his head against the coffee table, and lay motionless, showing no signs of life. Alana recounted how she had been paralyzed with fear, not knowing what to do, her mind completely blank. Just then Jerome had appeared. He said he was just stopping by to invite her to dinner at our house. But when he walked in, he witnessed the entire terrifying scene. "I wanted to call the police, sister," Alana said, her eyes red and swollen. "I wanted to turn myself in, do the right thing, but Jerome wouldn't let me." He stood there, looking at her with chilling calm. "You'll go to prison, Alana," he said in a cold voice. "You'll lose your whole life. Let me help you. For Simone. I'll protect you." I listened, my body numb with disbelief. Jerome, the husband I loved, the man I trusted implicitly, had manipulated my sister, using my own love for him as a weapon. He had convinced Alana that hiding the truth was the only way to protect me, to spare our family from the shame and devastation. That night, taking advantage of the darkness and the isolation of the low country woods near the Ogeechee River, Jerome had carried Darren's body in his car. He quickly dug a grave on the hillside in a place that no one knew about and buried the secret there. Then, he had brought Alana back to our house while I was already asleep and hid her in the attic. "It will only be temporary," he had told her, "until everything calms down." But temporary turned into 30 long years. Jerome had turned Alana into a ghost, living in secret in her own sister's house. When the police investigated Darren's disappearance, they discovered that he had withdrawn a large sum of money before he vanished. Jerome skillfully spread the rumor that Alana and Darren were having an affair and had run off together. That story, coupled with both of their disappearances, made everyone, even me, believe that it was true. The investigation stalled, and Alana, in the eyes of the world, became a fugitive who had abandoned her family. I stood there, tears streaming down my face, but not from sadness. It was pure, unadulterated rage. It was the agonizing pain of betrayal. I remembered the days after Alana's disappearance, when I cried until I had no strength left, when our mother aged overnight from grief. I remembered Jerome's sudden literary career, his successful novels, the wealth and fame that we had achieved. All of it built upon my sister's pain and sacrifice. I didn't know Alana. I whispered, my voice broken and filled with anguish. I didn't know anything. I trusted him completely. The first few years in the attic were hell, sister. Alana continued, her voice hoarse, her gaze lost as if she were reliving those dark days. I lived with constant fear, overwhelming guilt, and an unbearable loneliness. Every night, I dreamed that the police were coming for me, or worse, that I was trapped forever in the darkness. She paused, breathing shakily. To keep from going completely insane, I started writing. I wrote about the stories I dreamed, about worlds where I could be free, where I wasn't just a shadow. I listened, feeling every word like a physical blow. I imagined Alana, the vibrant young woman she once was, hunched in that cold attic, clinging to her pencil like the last flickering spark of hope. And one day, she continued, Jerome found my writings. I thought he would encourage me, tell me to keep them for myself. But no, sister. His eyes lit up as if he had discovered a hidden treasure. He said, Alana, you have real talent. Write for me. I will be your voice to the world. I was stunned. My head was spinning. I remembered the time when Jerome had suddenly announced that he was quitting his accounting job at the newspaper to pursue his passion for writing. Friends and family were surprised because he had never shown any interest in literature before. I had felt so proud of him, thinking that he had finally found a creative spark that I had never even imagined he possessed. But now the truth was like a slap in the face. Jerome wasn't a writer. He was a thief who had stolen Alana's talent, turning her into a ghostwriter. A ghost in the most literal sense, locked away inside my own house. Alana continued, her voice trembling, but filled with a deep-seated bitterness. Many times I wanted to stop, to turn myself into the police. I couldn't bear the guilt, the feeling of living a life that wasn't mine. But every time I said that, Jerome threatened me. He said that if I turned myself in, you would be the one to suffer the most. He said that you couldn't withstand the blow of knowing that your sister had committed a crime, and that your husband was her accomplice. He said that you would lose everything, your family, your reputation, everything you love. I bit my lip, trying to hold back the flood of tears that were streaming down my cheeks. Alana's words were tearing at my heart. Jerome had used my love, and Alana's love for me, to manipulate her, to keep her trapped in the darkness. I covered my face, trying to contain the sobs that were racking my body. Forgive me, Alana. I whispered, my voice barely audible, broken with anguish. I didn't know. I never imagined anything like this could happen. But Alana shook her head. She took my hands in hers, her thin fingers squeezing them tightly, as if trying to pull me out of the depths of my pain. Don't apologize, sister, she said. I let him manipulate me too. I was afraid. I believed that doing what he said was the only way to protect you. She recounted that living in secret like that had become increasingly difficult, especially since I had retired and was spending more time at home. Before, because you left early and came back late and went to sleep right after dinner to have energy for the next day, you never noticed. That's why I had to shower quickly when you two were out, she said, looking down at the floor. That's why I had to steal food from the refrigerator at night. I tried not to leave any traces, but sometimes I was clumsy, like with the puddle of water in the bathroom or the piece of sausage you bought. Suddenly I remembered all those strange, unexplained details, those subtle signals that I had unconsciously chosen to ignore. Now everything made sense, but it was a sense that was too painful to accept. I thought about Jerome's novels that I had read and admired. I had always wondered why the setting seemed so old-fashioned, so nostalgic, as if time had stopped decades ago. The characters didn't use cell phones. The internet didn't exist. They wrote letters. They waited in vain like lost souls. Now I finally understood. It wasn't just a literary style. It was because Alana's world had truly stopped 30 years ago. She was trapped in the past. She could only write about what she knew, about the world she remembered. Those stories of two people who never managed to find each other were a reflection of her own tragedy. A life severed from the outside world. Alana took my hands, her eyes filled with tears. Sister Simone, she said, her voice trembling but firm. I can't live like this anymore. I have paid for my mistake for 30 years in this prison. Now I want to face real justice. I want to turn myself in." Her words were like a final stab, cutting the last threads of hope that I had left. I had already lost her once when I thought she had run far away. I didn't want to lose her again. But looking into her eyes, I knew that it was what she needed, what she deserved. Liberation, the truth, no matter how painful. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but I nodded, squeezing her hand tightly. "Okay, Alana," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "I'll take you to the police station. We will face everything together." I hugged her tightly, feeling her fragile body in my arms. My heart was filled with overwhelming pain, but there was also a tiny spark of hope, the hope that, although late, I could still help her regain her freedom. The next morning, I dressed Alana in one of my clean outfits. The dress was too big for her thin frame, but at least it made her look more presentable. We hadn't slept all night. I sat next to her in the living room, telling her about how the world had changed, about the towering skyscrapers, the smartphones that everyone was glued to, and the loved ones who were no longer with us. Alana just listened in silence, her gaze lost in the distance, as if she were trying to imagine a world that had been stolen from her. I drove to the Central Police Department with Alana seated beside me. She was hunched over in the passenger seat, her hands clasped tightly together, her eyes fixed on the window like a stranger seeing an unfamiliar planet for the first time. "Everything has changed so much," she whispered, amazed at the sight of electric cars driving by and children taking pictures with their phones. I took her hand and squeezed it gently, trying to give her some courage. "I'm here, Alana," I said, my voice trembling. "We're going to get through this together." At the police department, I asked to speak directly with the head of detectives. At first they refused, saying that we needed to make an appointment. But when I mentioned the disappearance of Alana Whitlock, which had occurred 30 years ago, their attitude changed completely. An officer led us to an interrogation room, a small sterile room with gray walls and an icy metal table. With my help, Alana began to tell her story. Her voice was clear and steady, as if she had rehearsed those words 1,000 times in her mind. She spoke of that fateful night, of Darren, of the accidental blow that had taken his life, and of how Jerome had hidden her in the attic, turning her into a ghost for 3 long decades. The police listened with disbelief. One of them took notes nonstop, while another spoke into his radio with an urgent tone. Alana's confession sent shockwaves through the entire police department. The case files were immediately reopened. An investigative team was dispatched to my house to search the attic and collect evidence of Alana's hidden life. The manuscripts, the food containers, the dirty blanket. Another group, following Alana's precise directions, set off for the low country woods near the Ogeechee River. After several hours of searching, they found human remains buried beneath an old tree deep in the forest. Preliminary DNA analysis confirmed that they were the remains of Darren Albright, the man everyone had believed had run away with her. The arrest warrant for Jerome was issued that same day. The police set up an ambush at our house, awaiting his return from his trip to Atlanta. I wasn't there, but later Mr. Hamilton, our neighbor, told me that Jerome had offered no resistance when they handcuffed him in front of the gate. He had just lowered his head, his face expressionless, as if he had always known that this day would come. Hearing that, I felt a strange emptiness. The man I had once loved, the man I had blindly trusted, was now nothing more than a distant shadow, burdened with the secret that had destroyed my entire family. I hired the best lawyer for Alana, someone who was committed to fighting for her to receive leniency. Given the argument of self-defense and the 30 years she had spent imprisoned and manipulated by Jerome, he believed that justice would see her as a victim, not a criminal. I spent all day preparing things to take to her, clean clothes, books, and the dishes that she had loved most as a child. I wanted her to know that, no matter what, I would always be by her side. But a few days later, while I was packing things to visit her, the phone rang. A cold, formal voice spoke from the other end of the line. "Ms. Whitlock, we regret to inform you that Alana Whitlock took her own life at the detention center last night." The phone slipped from my hands and fell to the floor with a dry thud. My world shattered once again. Alana, my sister, the one I had just gotten back, had chosen to leave forever, leaving me alone in a pain that was beyond words. She had told the truth. She had faced her past, but maybe she couldn't bear another trial, or the stares of a world that doesn't forgive. The officer said that Alana had left a letter for me. That afternoon they handed it over. I held it with trembling hands, looking at her soft, familiar handwriting, the same handwriting I had seen in the attic notebook, but now it was clumsy, unsteady, as if she had used her last ounce of strength to write it. I opened the letter, and tears began to flow even before I read the first line. "Dear Sister Simone," she wrote, "when you read this, I will truly be free. For 30 years I wrote to survive, to keep from disappearing, but I could never write under my own name. I lived as a ghost, and now it is time for that ghost to dissolve. I don't regret speaking the truth. It was the only right thing I did. Don't be sad. Think of it as if I have finally finished the story of my life. The final manuscript is still in the attic, inside a wooden box under the table. It is the only work I wrote about myself. If you can, please let it carry the name of Lucia Whitlock." I folded the letter, hugged it to my chest, and soaked it with my tears. Lucia Whitlock, the name Alana had wanted to use if she ever became a writer, the name that had been stolen from her. I knew that I had to fulfill her last wish. I would search for that manuscript and bring it to light, so that the world would finally know Alana's story, not as a ghost but as a woman, a writer, a soul who had fought to be free. The trial against Jerome was held a few months later, turning into a media circus that shook the entire country. The press dubbed it the ghostwriter of Savannah scandal. Newspapers filled their front pages with Alana's life story. A young woman locked away, stripped of her freedom, and used to build the fame of a man who didn't deserve it. Faced with irrefutable evidence, Darren's remains found in the low country woods, the manuscripts discovered in the attic, and Alana's testimony before her death, Jerome finally lowered his head and confessed. He was charged with multiple felonies: unlawful appropriation of copyrights, illegal deprivation of liberty, conspiracy to cover up a crime, and obstruction of justice. The sentence was a deserved ending, but I felt no relief. For me, Jerome had died the day the man I loved transformed into someone I no longer recognized was the day I unearthed the truth. I couldn't bring myself to attend the trial. Facing him was simply beyond my capabilities. I couldn't bear to look into those eyes, the same eyes that once whispered sweet words of love to me, now concealing such a horrifying secret. Instead, I retreated to the house, a place that had once been a warm and inviting home, but now felt like nothing more than a hollow shell filled with agonizing memories. One afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the cobblestone street, I made the decision to venture back up to the attic. This time, the familiar feelings of fear and oppression were absent. With a flashlight in hand, I ascended each step, my heart feeling strangely lighter, as if I were on a quest to uncover a piece of Alana that she had left behind. Just as she had described in her letter, I found the wooden box tucked away beneath the table. It was a small antique box, yet it was remarkably well preserved, as if it safeguarded her most cherished possession. Inside, I discovered a stack of meticulously handwritten manuscripts on pages yellowed with age. Alana's elegant, flowing script was remarkably clear, as if she were right there beside me, ready to share her story. I carefully carried the box down to the living room, settled myself beneath the soft glow of the desk lamp, and began to read. What I held in my hands was an autobiography, a novel chronicling the events of her own life. She wrote about our childhood, about the carefree days we spent running through the sprawling Savannah fields, and about our shared dreams of becoming writers. She even recounted a secret she had once confided in me. She revisited the devastating night that had stolen her future from her. She wrote of the 30 long years she had spent in darkness and the incredible strength it took to prevent her spirit from shattering completely. Each and every page was like a painful stab to the heart, but it was also a moving song of resilience, a testament to her unwavering love for life, regardless of how difficult it became. I dedicated weeks to editing the manuscript, meticulously reviewing each and every line. as if I were reaching out and touching Alana's very soul. There were countless nights when I stayed up until the break of dawn, tears streaming down my face as I read the passages in which she described her profound loneliness in the attic and the moments when she would imagine herself finally free, stepping out into the radiant sunlight. The book was more than just her personal story. It was the voice of a forgotten individual, someone stripped of their identity. I knew without a doubt that I had to share this story with the world, ensuring that Alana would be remembered as more than just a name in my memory, but as the true writer she always had been. I reached out to the publishing house that had previously worked with Jerome. Initially, they were hesitant, concerned about the potential fallout from the surrounding scandal, but the moment I sent them Alana's manuscript, they were completely won over. "This is a masterpiece," the editor declared over the phone, his voice thick with emotion. "We will publish it, and we will do so with all the respect that Alana deserves." The book was eventually published under her true name, Alana Whitlock. Instead of a traditional prologue, I chose to include a single sentence on the first page. "No one should be imprisoned in the dark, especially if they love freedom." It was my personal message to her, to my beloved sister, whom I loved more than anything in the world. The book quickly became a phenomenon. Readers across America and eventually the entire world were deeply moved by Alana's life story. They admired her undeniable literary talent, her sincerity, and the poetic beauty that resonated through every line she wrote. Even Jerome's old works, which were now re-edited and published under Alana's name, began to gain popularity once more, serving as a way to right the injustice that had been done. Alana, though no longer with us, had finally become a recognized and cherished writer. I read the reviews, the heartfelt letters from readers, and my heart swelled with a mixture of joy and sorrow. "You did it, Alana," I thought to myself. "You finally got your voice back." Sometimes I still make my way up to the attic. It's no longer a place of confinement and despair. Instead, it's been thoroughly cleaned and transformed into a small cozy library. I make sure to open the window, allowing the sunlight to flood the room, illuminating the shelves where Alana's works are now respectfully displayed. I stand there, gazing out at the bustling street below. Alana's voice has been recovered, and justice has, in some way, been served. I know that she's somewhere out there in the sunlight, within the pages of her books, and forever in my heart, finally free. And when everything was said and done, I came to a profound understanding. There is no wall thick enough to contain the truth indefinitely. Lies, no matter how carefully concealed, will eventually decay and crumble, just like the dust that settles on old shelves. Alana's life serves as a powerful reminder that silence can sometimes be far crueler than guilt, and that fear can transform a person into a ghost trapped within their own existence. If there is one lesson that I hope you take away from this story, it is this: dare to confront the truth, no matter how painful it may be. Speak your mind, even if your voice trembles. Because it is only when we dare to step out of the darkness that we can truly be free. And only when the truth is spoken can imprisoned souls finally find peace. The story you have just heard has had names and locations changed to protect the privacy of those involved. We share this story not to judge, but with the sincere hope that someone will listen and take a moment to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence behind closed doors? I truly wonder, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you choose to remain silent in order to maintain the peace? Or would you face everything head-on in order to reclaim your voice? I am genuinely interested in hearing your thoughts, because every story has the potential to become a beacon of hope, guiding others along their own paths. May God always bless us, and I am confident that courage will lead us to brighter days. For now, on the final screen, I'll share a couple of my channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they'll surprise you. Thank you for sticking with me until the very end. Did you enjoy the story, and where are you listening from? Let's connect in the comments section. If you appreciated the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks, which will allow me to continue bringing you more stories like this. Your kind support means the world to me. I'm looking forward to reading your comments about the story. On the screen you'll see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more to discover on my channel, so don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next life story. With love and respect,